Welcome back, audience. Welcome back. How you been? Good? Good. I'm enjoying my beautiful day. And I want to talk about free will and the paradox of free will. And what do we mean by when we say free will, too? Of course, everything I talk about is about some application in your life. It's not, I'm not interested in just talking. Everything that I tell you, I live. And there's a few things that I'm curious about trying out. And until I do, I won't talk about this because that will be, again, just regurgitating knowledge. And I'm not interested in that because we all know where that leads. So, free will. In the last video, I talked about the polarity, the flow of energies, and how those energies are not allowed to flow in the natural direction and flow the opposite. And it creates this abomination of, of the world. It creates this downward spiral, if you will, that leads to self-destruction. That's the path of ego. It always leads to self-destruction. If you don't let, well, I should say it this way. One thing that is sort of undeniable, that we all have desires here. In the previous video, I talked about that we don't have any wounds, that we have desires. And I have a suspicion that what we call soul, what we call heart, and if you have a doubt of what that is, if you felt a single emotion in your life, you felt where that's coming from, right? So that's your soul. And there seems to be these fractures, if you will, the separations in your soul, which wants to be fused back in again. And each one of that tree is basically your desires, right? And then we have the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And really is that simple. The tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Two directions. And every time there's something happens in your world that causes you to have a emotional reaction or a trigger, anger, hate, or whatever, it points out that there is a strong desire inside of you. And so now you have two options. You can go the tree of knowledge way, and then you can go the tree of life way. It seems that there is that option at that point. The path of a villain and the path of the hero, if you will. And as you can see, depending on which direction you choose, that's what you may consider a will. In that moment, that little seed moment, whichever direction you choose, that determines your mythology. That determines of how, if you're going to be playing this game as a villain or a hero in that little moment. That seed, okay? And then neither of them actually have this concept of so-called free will. But I should phrase that in a way that may be easier to understand. Once you choose the path of the tree of knowledge, or the path of the villain, what happens is that it's all goes from memory, from knowledge, therefore memory, the process of thinking, analyzing, and planning. That's the way you live your life. Planning, thinking, planning, like that's what you do. You're trying to manipulate situations and people to get what you want. Is that type of very hard way to move forward, to get ahead. And inevitably you hurt other people, not in a positive way, because there is this, I'm going to talk about the other side. You push other people into suffering, and while you're gaining whatever your that source, that fracture is asking for, but you're using knowledge to pacify it, and it is never ending. You always have to go on that path. Okay. And then you may say, well, that's a free will. Nothing about is free will. It's the will that is completely automated. It's absolutely predictable. And you may think that you're clever by using your intellect in manipulating the situation, but uh, in the grand scheme of things, that's the dumbest thing that you can do, because there's an illusion that you are making choices, that you have a free will. Everything is pre-programmed, but you're playing that character of a villain, and you think that you're making choices, but you're not. You are a program. You're not even a live being when you're in that mode, acting out that knowledge that's already prescripted. And so you always consult your intellect, which is in this case about your internal processes, is literally a Satan. Okay, so that's the direction. And so therefore, the will of choice, basically thinking, oh, well, I'm going to think this through, I'm going to make a logical choice, and then I'm going to choose that. And you choose this about your life. And so if you do that, it may seem that you made a logical choice, but that's all was predetermined. It's not possible to make an like original and spontaneous. So therefore, the choice is an illusion. It appears that you're choosing, but you're not choosing anything. Everything is predetermined. So that's a true illusion of free will. You're not choosing anything. Okay? Now, let's go on the other side. Other side is none other but directional flow of energies in the opposite direction. Okay, this is why I'm so adamant about communicating this message that it's about one direction or another direction. Okay, and in this direction, the thinking is applied on a tangible, and on the things, not on the psyche. Direction is different. You see, this type of thinking applies on the psyche. This type of thinking is applied on things, which is correct way of using thought. Thoughts are things, but you don't want to make your heart into a thing. Okay. Therefore, if you move into the villain's direction, the heart is being full of knowledge, and knowledge is memory, and the memory is this element of earth or coal in this case, like metaphorically speaking, right? So you build this memory in your heart that is static, and so that always creates pain. As you go through life, you see something, it's pain, and then you also have to pacify it, and so that's your life. This is all predetermined. This is why sometimes people call it like non-player characters, NPCs, and all evil or all mischievous approaches to life is automatic, and therefore not blamable also. You see, it's and why some people choose this way and that way, I don't know. That's something that I don't know, why some people choose this way and some people choose that way. Maybe that's pre-programmed. I really don't know. But I know that there is a choice, and I know that the choice is made with your attention, not logic. When that thing happens inside you, you can go through the thinking route, or you can go through the feeling, and it will take you to the 0 point. Basically, as an example, event happens, right? These events that happen in your life, that we call like negative events, they are also predetermined. This is part of your mythology. This is part of this fracture in your heart, because it seems that we come here and we have these these fractures, and then we want to play this game of life in order to fuse these fractures back into alignment. And every time there's one fracture is being fused, there's a fulfillment of some sort of desire. So we're here to definitely, for sure, fulfill our desires. Not a question about that. But fulfill your soul desire is in that correction, the correct direction. And then if you do not go in the correct direction, if you don't start with the alchemy and you go through the intellect, you go the other direction, what happens is that you you basically fall asleep. And so there's something that is inside you that it's alive, it wants to come out, but you know, the process is going this way. Now, as you go into this path, this choice, this when that trigger happens and you go into this way, it really brings you to two extremes, either in a hell or abyss. Hell is this fire element that is out of control. It's not flowing in the right direction. And abyss is this water element that is completely stagnant and frozen. And so therefore there's a complete stagnation, depression, pressure, or a uncontrolled passion, just anger, hatred, right? Or fear in this case. So you see there's the hell and the abyss is the two possible outcomes of this tree of knowledge. Okay? But if you go through the alchemy way, the correct direction, you start with the soul. You don't start with your body, which is brain. You start with your soul. Something happens in your soul, you start there. There's a boom, desire is born, right? And then desire may be whatever it may be, okay? Once the desire is born, the fulfillment of that desire is right behind that feeling of negative emotion. You start there. You go there until you find that feeling behind it all. And then with that feeling, you go into your imagination and dream what would be like, right? And you imagine what would that be like. That is a correct path, okay? The path of tree of life. So when you pick this type of path, it's a different type of mythology. You're gonna play out mythology of a hero now. But what about the free will? The thing is that the paradox is that you also do not have free will in this case. It means that what happens is that this illusion of the free will that you had before, that there is a choice, you can make a choice with your intellect, right? Which is always leads to the end, abyss or hell. That disappears, and then there's a realization, is like, oh, I'm not choosing anything. The mythology is already predetermined whether I chose the villain or the hero. There's an illusion of the free will as a villain, an illusion of choice. And then in the hero's journey, you can see that there's a will that you are not in control, but that sets you free. And so that's why I like to say there's a illusion of the free will and the will that sets you free. Okay? It's this will. People will sometimes call it will of God. But I don't want to anthropomorphize God, because that to me is a disrespect of that principle. Because you're making another just imaginary friend. Not saying that you can't have imaginary friends. You can totally have that, but that's not God. But there seems to be this spontaneous unfoldment in an infinite way that stems from this source, this divine spark, and this void, if you will, and that from there, that path is being brought out. And so there is this sense that you don't know you of how it's going to come about, and you don't, you don't care, because you already feel the good feelings that you would want to feel anyway, and that brings the unfoldment of your journey, that when people say, like, the path in front of you disappears, and that disappearance of that path makes you be comfortable with the unknown, and that comfort with the unknown is what this peace and bliss is. And so you start moving through life with that peace and bliss, not knowing how it's going to unfold. So you're not planning it, you're not thinking as well in this direction of life, okay? But there is another process that's happening, which is opposite of thinking, which is dreaming, okay? And I want to distinguish this very clearly, because some people confuse thinking with dreaming, and they're actually the opposite directions of energy flow. They could not be more different, okay? And the word dreaming is supposed to have much more respect and supposed to be distinguished from the word thinking. Like, not even a little bit. It's the opposite. It's like plus and a minus. That's how different they are. Because the process of the energy flow that before was in this logical, analysis and determination of the outcome through the logic, changes now, and that same the energy has to flow, and the energy flows into, because now you feel good, and after feeling good, the energy flows into dream. And so then you are dreaming about your desires, fulfillment of your desires. Daydreaming or night dreaming or lucid dreaming or astral projection or having out of body experiences, they're all where you can actually freely fulfill your desires. Okay? So as you're fulfilling your desires in the dreams, you don't really have any attachment to the outcome on a physical. And then there gives you another layer of comfort of why it's totally fine not knowing how it's going to be unfold. But as long as you're dreaming this outcome and fulfilling your desires, and this process is replacing the thinking. And again, the thinking in the wrong direction, I have to be clarified. If they're thinking in the wrong direction, because the thinking in the right direction is okay. You see, thinking in the wrong direction is not okay. So, but the thinking in the right direction, you use your brain in the physical matters, right? And then the soul, you use it to alchemize this emotions and feelings. You keep it where it's at, and then it moves into the mind, and you dream with the mind and goes back into the brain body thing, right? And so that's the correct direction. It really is that simple, guys. It's the problem. The life is either bliss or suffering. There's no in between. And the sooner you can accept that, the better it's going to be. And in fact, I'm even going to tell you that the biggest fear that you have is the fear of that love, the fear of that bliss. That's the biggest fear. If you conquer that one, all the other ones disappear. Okay? And so the biggest fear that you have is you are afraid of love, or that part of you rather is afraid of love, because that part of you that is separated cannot, But the thing is that what happens, there's a paradox that there's this duality and is afraid to become unity because it's afraid of losing itself. But the paradox is that when it is merging into unity, the duality does not disappear, but there's this beautiful side of that duality emerges. So you don't actually die. Like there's this static version of you dies, but there's a beautiful version, immortal and eternal version of you is born. This is why you're not losing anything at all by facing that energy of love and bliss. that is so scary. And sometimes, people like find it difficult to just sit in one place and tune into that peace, because it's so scary to be with themselves, where everything that you ever wanted is. You start from there, you see. So, okay, so as you can see, whichever way you go, you don't have actually free will on this level. I'm talking specifically about like the soul, the heart, okay, the mythology. If you go this, there's an illusion of free will and the illusion of choice. And if you go this way, there's completely choiceless, uh, you know, uh, choiceless unfoldment of will. You can call it the will of God or the will of Satan, I suppose. I don't know. The will of the devil and the will of the God, I suppose. But one is fulfilling your ego tantrums, and another one's fulfilling your the soul desires. Okay, so your soul desire, as you fulfilling your soul desire, um, you are moving with so-called will of God, with that pattern that is infinite and spontaneous pattern that is unfolding, and fulfilling your desires in kind of unplanned way that you have not really possibly can see with your brain how that's going to come about. But the only thing that you are doing is dreaming about it. Okay, this is where, like, again, I have to say that your life as a mythology is unplanned. The everyday tasks where you use your brain to get shit done is planned, of course. That's what I'm saying. That I'm distinguishing very clearly that because sometimes people communicate this and they don't clarify that it's not about not planning anything, in life. No, the thinking is in the right direction. You plan the tangible things. You do not plan your mythology. You do not plan your destiny, but you plan the things to get to. Like if you need to go somewhere, you gotta make a plan when it's gonna be, what time. You are that free will, or that degree of the free will that you still have is in this physical world of things. That's planning still functions there. You use your logic in that realm where it's supposed to be used. Logic does not go away. Okay. So that's, you plan everything there, but you do not plan the outcome of your destiny. You dream about that. Okay. So as you can see, in your soul, in your heart. And I also have to say something about this. If you were moving this way and you decided to go this way now, when you go that way, the path of the villain, the path of the knowledge, you put other people into the loops of suffering, while you maintaining your head afloat above the water, and kicking really hard and using all this willpower to stay afloat. Very difficult life to live. The most difficult life to live is the life of a villain. In that sense, there's difficulties, of course, in the life of the hero, but it starts at the heart, you see. But anyway, why am I saying this? Is that as you move through life, you keep your head afloat, and everybody else is suffering. You put everybody else in suffering. When you go into the hero's journey, what happens is that you're not trying to keep afloat. You let things to unfold, but as you go through life in this, carefree manner, I suppose, you you do tend to trigger the people, but you trigger them not to put them in a cycle of suffering, but you kind of shine the light upon them for them to kind of, you give them that jolt of, could be like a pain or whatever, but that pain may trigger them to gravitate towards your direction. And it's not like it's your direction, it's the direction of the unfoldment of nature. But this is what you do. You, with that motion, as you're moving through life like this, and other people can move in the other direction, you trigger them that you can snap them the fuck up to wake them up to go into the direction that it's much cooler. And so you do cause a certain type of pain in other people as well. So whichever way you go, villain or a hero, you're gonna cause pain. But when you go in the villains, you cause the pain that is there's no way out, there's suffering. But when you go on a hero's journey, you cause the pain that gives the people a chance to start growing. Okay, this is why this idea, which I was kind of disillusioned with, that it's possible to live this life without hurting anybody, without causing pain, and it's not possible. But what it's possible is that you can create the pain of suffering or the pain of growth, which is temporary, and release people into freedom. And this one is perpetual. It never ends until that cycle is broken. You see? So you got to be okay, because sometimes people are really caring, and when they go on the right path and they feel in their heart that this is the right thing to do in their bones, but other people are hurting because of you doing, you don't stop. These people need to wake the fuck up, and they need to use that pain to start growing. Okay, you give them opportunity, so you're not really doing anything bad about this, as long as you're moving into, from this type of direction. And you are moving in this type of direction just purely by alchemizing the pain and pressure that is arising on, almost day-to-day basis. And you become better and better at it, and then eventually, when used to be this heavy, and paralyzing pain, now it's just this energy stream that is actually very enjoyable. So that energy stream is what is going to unfold your mythology, okay? So we leave it at this, at soul, at the heart level. It's a simple thing, in a simple way. There's only the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and neither of them really have this type of free will, as in choosing something. But there's one that's kind of enslaves you, and another one, it kind of sets you free. So the only free will that really exists at this level is the will that sets you free. Not the will of choice, but the will of freedom. Okay. All right. So we're ending at this particular level of the heart, the emotions. Okay. How that determines everything, determines your mythology. But then what you can do is, mind has his own degrees of freedom. Okay, we talked about the soul. Now we're talking about the mind. Mind meaning, I don't talk about the brain. Brain is not the mind. Brain is part of the body, and brain is an instrument, a tool. It's not the mind. Mind is that capacity for you to imagine something, dream something, and have a immersive and vivid experience without being in a physical reality. Okay? That's what I mean by mind. And mind, obviously, as you feel these good emotions, it will imagine a good outcomes, or you can even at this point, what I'm trying to say at this point, the mind has its own degrees of freedom. The events that you're going to create, you kind of do have free will about this, meaning what kind of form is going to shape, is going to take, and what kind of maybe what kind of people is going to, like that. You have a degree of freedom. The mythology is already predetermined. You just choose direction. But here there's this events that's going to take in your life, and how they're going to shape. You do have certain degree of freedom. Okay, so this is why people say everything is possible. Everything is possible within the degrees of freedom. So you have the soul realm, and then you have this mind realm. And so this way you can imagine, for example, whether it's going to be red or blue. This is something that you can imagine. It's not detrimental to your mythology, but there's this, you may have a personal preference for it, okay? And it's totally fine to have that personal preference and imagine what you want to imagine. And so you have a mythology, and here you have events. Because really, like, what you're trying to say is like, okay, this event I want, this is what I want to feel. This is the pixels are gonna, what kind of pixels gonna take shape in my screen, and these are going to be the perspectives and the thought patterns that I'm going to have. It's a state of consciousness that you are creating as an event. Okay, and that's the degree of freedom. Create whatever you want and be as good as possible in this. Then you move into the body, and as I said already, the correct thinking is right. Like the plan, all these tangible things where you can move the object from one place to another. Use your applications and organize things. That thinking is perfectly fine, and planning is perfectly fine, and that is the degree of freedom that you have in the physical world. Okay, you actually can move things from one place to another physically, and so, or digitally in this case. World is becoming quite digital, but I consider that part of the physical world, and so you can move things through your decision making, how you want them to be arranged. Okay, so there's another degree of freedom, but that, whenever you do and how you're going to move, it's not going to determine your mythology, because that's already been predetermined, and it's also not going to determine what kind of events are going to take place in your life, because you already dreamed about that. That is going to take place. Okay, but there's still left some degree of freedom of the motion, but you're already frozen in the mythology, frozen in events and synchronicities that are going to come into your life, but you have still degree of freedom of moving one thing to another. You know what I'm trying to say. You still have this physical degree of freedom, but that will never change your mythology, and will never change the events that are coming into your life. So this is why you start with mythology, events, and then the story is going to be weaved. And so there we have these degrees of freedom on all those three levels. And I also have to say that there's this absolute zero, or the state of void, where your mind, your soul, and your body is in one and indistinguishable. This is like the very early stages of a baby, I suppose, or a fetus. This is how they experience the world, because these are not distinguishable, and then they start separating, and then the soul, the mind, and the body start separating. Emotion separates from the sensations and the thought patterns, right? So, but as they separate, they still have that 0 point. Your soul, your mind, and your body has the 0 point. The 0 point of your soul is this peace and bliss. The 0 point of your mind is this crispiness, clarity, and beauty. And then the 0 point of your body is what I would call deep relaxation or ecstasy. Because bliss and ecstasy, they're not exactly the same. Bliss is emotional, and ecstasy is sensational. Okay, so these are the 0 points of each of the levels, and you start from there actually. So that's all I want to say about the free will. And in the next video, I want to talk about what happens when somebody is awakening but not opening their heart, meaning that the thought patterns become more and more aware of what's going on, but the heart is still that of a call. And what happens when that happens? Because I see this happening, and it's not a good news. That is not genuine, growing coherently as a soul being and fulfilling your desires as they go. That's still, um, I consider as a negative uh, movement. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Bye.